This session is being recorded and will be available, I'm assuming, Beth, for use for those that maybe couldn't get in. Beth, can you tell us how many are actually in attendance today and how many registered?
We have 38 in attendance and 78 registered.
Oh my, okay.
40.
I'm having a meeting, but somebody keeps talking.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point, then I will turn it back over to Beth. And again, I thank you for your participation today and for being willing to become educated on this particular topic. So Beth.
And I'm very pleased to introduce someone who is well known to you all, Dr. Tony Larson, our Director of Action and Advocacy, who is here to give an introduction into both the League of Women Voters and the Legislative Action Committee. Tony.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to deal with both advocacy and lobbying, advocacy being a broader term than lobbying. Are you putting up the slides? There they are. Okay. So moving on to what we're going to be talking about in this presentation, and we're dividing it between Andrea and me, and then also Harry Hempy and Hannah. I'm sorry, I'm spacing on the last name. So we're going to talk about what?
Hannah Crow.
Yeah, I thought that's
It's Hannah Crow.
I was I was going to say that, and then I said, am I sure? So we're going to talk about the functions and the definitions, some touch on laws and rules. And Andrea's going to talk mostly about managing government relations in organizations and communications and presentations at the state legislature. And it's applicable to any kind of legislative or presentation kind of situation dealing with legislative issues for the League. And then I will come back and talk about relationships among the League levels of League. So first of all, the functions of the League, which you probably all well know, but I kind of divided into 4 instead of 3. But we have voter service, and Jerry Cummins is the renowned person in that area. It has been for a long time and has just finished up a very busy season. We have education, of course, where we're doing forums and educating people on candidates and educating people on our positions and what's going on at the legislature. And then advocacy and lobbying. And those 2 are usually combined. People have this feeling about, they're just a little confused about using the terms advocacy and lobbying. And so advocacy is general information supporting the organization. So if you're out and about and you're talking about when we get to be out and about again, if you're talking about the League, you know, you're supporting the League, you're advocating on behalf of the League and all the things that it does. And, you know, we also talk about our positions within advocacy, but it's a general, it's a more broad term. Lobbying is pretty much they have definitions of it, particularly Internal Revenue Service definitions for lobbying. And we have to follow some of those, well, we should follow all of the legal definitions and legal requirements underneath lobbying that the IRS puts out. And those have been developed over a long period of time. I always, you know, sort of chuckle at the fact that in 1976, the Congress passed legislation that was dealing with lobbying rules at the federal level. And it took them till about 1992 to actually pass the rules and regulations. So when they demand that you hurry up, I always sort of say, and direct lobbying is when you are directly talking to a legislator and or his or her employee or the legislative body. It's when you have pretty much like a face-to-face kind of relationship with somebody has influence and can pass laws. Then there's grassroots lobbying, and that's when you reach beyond your organization and attempt to get other people to influence legislation that will affect the opinion of this is to affect the opinion of the general public so that they will help you out in your lobbying activities. And I always kind of describe it as reaching beyond the organization. And there are certain rules around direct lobbying and grassroots lobbying. The IRS is more happier if you're doing direct lobbying, if you will, than grassroots lobbying. So the allowance for how much you could spend for direct lobbying is larger than the allowance for what you could spend on grassroots lobbying. And the term political activity for these purposes are when there's a campaign and it's an individual running for office. It's specific to people and something we can't do. Okay. We've just gone through an election, and I would bet that most of you at this point in time know what an initiative is and what a referendum is. So initiatives are initiated by the citizens, proposals to get something on the ballot. And there are rules around that. We passed fairly recently rules requiring signatures that have to come from the congressional districts, 2% from each one of them. And then also, if it's something that's going to change a constitutional amendment, it requires a 55% vote to pass. There's a sentiment that we need to make amending the Constitution much harder than it has been. And the referendum is something that is referred to the public. The Gallagher Amendment is an example of that. And the Y and Z that we passed a couple, 3 years ago now is also a referred item. Limitations on lobbying. Nonprofits can engage in lobbying activity, but there are limits. And if you run into anybody who says nonprofits, 501c3 kinds of nonprofits cannot lobby, please correct them. There's just too many people out there that just say nonprofits can't lobby, and what do you think you're doing, that kind of thing. And we need to get that out of the common parlance of people, because we have a pretty lenient kinds of rules around lobbying for nonprofit organizations. Substantial lobbying activity was the first thing that appeared in the legislation at the federal level about what lobbying is, and substantial was not clear. And over time, there were 3 different kinds of definitions of substantial. And they decided that maybe we better put something in place that is more certain. So if you take what's called an H election, and not to be afraid of that, people were originally afraid of doing the H election. I think there are 4 lines in it, and you can undo that very quickly if you want to, if you find it's not working for you. And there certainly are a few circumstances where you can't take the H election, but I don't think that would apply to us. So substantial now is 20% of the first $500,000 of your budget, which most people obviously chuckle at, because there aren't very many of us in the league that have those kinds of budgets. And then it's 15% for the next 500 and 10% up to about $1 million. So, and many things are not counted as lobbying. If you are a volunteer lobbying, there's no money spent. It has to have money spent for it to be counted as lobbying. So volunteers not getting paid, that doesn't count as lobbying. Also, you cannot deal with political campaigns, although there's a little bit of a tiny provision in there for some wiggle room for some organizations. And you cannot lobby outside the purpose of your organization. And if you get caught for any of those things, then there are penalties. I don't think I've ever run into activities outside of the organization's purpose. I don't, certainly not within the league. We're pretty careful about all that. But even other organizations, I don't remember having seen something about that, but no doubt somebody has done that. The next slide is what is not lobbying. And again, you know, there are lots of things that are safe harbors for us. So if you are doing a nonpartisan analysis of an item, such as housing, and you subsequently use it in a lobbying situation, you don't have to count the amount of money for the paper and the time spent, or if there's any staff time, you don't have to count that as lobbying. Again, studies and research, examination and discussion of broad issues, written requests from a governmental body. So if somebody from the legislature asks you to come and testify, you know, again, since we're volunteers, but if somebody were to ask Beth to testify, and she was doing it during the workday, she doesn't have to count that as lobbying, because even though she's being paid, because she has a request from a governmental body. If there are things that are attacking the league, we have self-defense that we can do, and all the communications around self-defense are not counted as lobbying. If you are just speaking to a legislator and you are not trying to influence them on a specific piece of legislation, then that does not count as lobbying. Working with the executive branch. So if you are on a committee that's working on air quality, for example, that doesn't count as lobbying. It's only a legislative body that counts as lobbying. And again, volunteers were not reimbursed. So I will, I want to mention a couple things before I turn it over to Andrea. There are some items that are in the toolkit on the website, the State League website. And what is in there is environmental scanning, an article on environmental scanning, which is an important aspect of, you know, knowing where you are sitting, the context in which your piece of legislation or the idea that you want to pitch is seated, and how it fits into the rest of the environment, or what is happening politically. I mean, we've got COVID now, and that is dominating a lot of our world. And how does that affect the kinds of legislation that we may be offering? And, you know, certainly last time we lost a lot of pieces of legislation because of all the upset over COVID and how we were going to function as a legislature, how they were going to function. There's also a piece on call to action, and Andrea may mention the call to action piece. It's a PowerPoint, and you're free to use that anytime you wish. There's And I want to mention also the program books to make sure that you all are aware of the program books. So we have a program book at the national level, Impact on Issues, and that has all the positions. Now, I just used the term program, and we're trying to move away from that. So you can see how old habits are hard to get rid of. But we're trying to talk about them as position books, because they are the positions of the basic principles, the basic items that we can use for taking positions on bills. And there's the national organizations, Impact on Issues, as I mentioned, that their position book. And then we have, for the state league, we have positions for actions. I think that's what I wanted to say, except that I want to talk a little bit about my favorite book, The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. And it's an environmental book. And there's an article also that you can read that's on the Colorado website, the league website, that talks about this book and titled We Speak for the Trees. And you know, a lot of the purpose of the book and what's behind the book is the fact that if we don't say something, who's going to say something? Because many of the causes, people, items, environment, whatever, they don't have voices of their own. And we are, I think, bound because of all our positions and because of our interest to speak up about what's going on. And the Lorax says, you know, they speak for the trees, and if somebody doesn't care, who will? So, Andrea.
Tony, I actually think the next few slides are still yours, if that works for you. I think I pick up at the next blue slide.
So where are we? Why should advocate, Bobby? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at two things, so maybe that's what happened.
Sorry.
So I couldn't print out anything for a long time. I just got my printer back online. So it's been 2 weeks, and I like to print things out and write on them, but so I'm a little confused. Okay, so the basic functions of the league, you got that. You know, the study to action, you know how we do that. We adopt a study and we study it for usually a couple of years. And then we develop the positions and start acting on those positions. Now, I know you all know that we have been encouraged for the last few years, last few cycles, not to say that we want to have more studies, that many of us feel we have enough positions to do just about anything we want to do. And so we have not done studies recently, other than at the local level when you want to study your school board or county commissioners and how many there should be or things like that. So at the state and national level, we really have not had any new studies. Now we've changed a few of our positions, but that's done by concurrence. And so in many cases, we know more than those who are being lobbied. Legislators have a lot of issues that come before them. They're not experts in all of the things that they have to take action on. And so we're there to help them. We're there to educate them, to give them good ideas about what is really happening with that legislation, how we see that legislation and information from our studies. And again, we speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. We do have a few things that we need to consider as we're taking action. How much time is there? How much expertise do we really have? And even if we have, excuse me, even if we have positions and we don't have people who are really experts in the area, it's oftentimes we just have to let it go. And if there's money involved, do we have money? And what are the current conditions? Are we are we in such a position that we can help the movement? Is our work really valuable, or is it something that we're really interested in, but other people have taken it up and they're being very successful, and so maybe we could focus on some other things. Okay, so the next one. This is just a list of items that you can ask before you decide if you're going to work on an issue. Does the league have positions? Do the members understand what's going on? Is it a priority of the league? Does the league have a unique role to play, or taking the role, maybe taking the lead? Are other organizations and coalitions involved, and how much can we help out, as I mentioned? Is this the best use of league time? Is working on this particular issue the right time to do this? Is it timely? Or is it something the legislators might just say, well, I'm not ready to take that up yet? What is the community involvement? Who would be best to support the league's issues? Next, ways to be involved. This is something that I am pretty sure that most of you know. You know the process, how a bill becomes a law, and Schoolhouse Rock is still on the website someplace if you really want to watch it. It's always fun. It's always fun to watch. Understanding the league positions, being aware of the environment. How do you do that? There are conferences, there are Zoom meetings these days, beyond belief, where you could get a lot of information about what's going on and what the situation is. And I know University of Denver was running a series on elections and polling and outcomes and all those kinds of things. And several entities are doing the same thing. And then my Siri thinks I'm talking to her. And then you can get on the mailing list of a lot of organizations, mailing list. You can go to their websites and see what they have to say about different things. Independent Sector, OMB Watch, those two are, and the Colorado Nonprofit Association are generally concerned about nonprofit issues, not education and environment, not specific areas so much. But what effect will charitable solicitation laws have on nonprofit organizations? So they look at those things. The Bell is pretty much the Bell and the Colorado Center on Law and Policy. They do a lot, and the Colorado Fiscal Institute, they do a lot with money issues and poverty and those kinds of things. So if you're interested in those issues, those are good places to go. And then, of course, there are organizations that deal with just about everything. So calls to action. Again, we have the PowerPoint that you can go to, and that you can offer to be an information source. We have been talking to a couple legislators about alternative voting methods, and we offered to help them out and offered our expertise and showed that we have quite a bit of expertise with Celeste Landry and Gathia Weiss for a couple of people who really know that topic. And analyze legislation by reading them. And if you have a point of view and you have some information on it, always, they're always available to talk to you, or you can email them, and most of them are pretty responsive, even though they get thousands of emails. You can use others' research and information and your own research, and you can decide if you want to be a reactive piece of the organization or a proactive piece. And we've been trying to move over to being proactive We're not there yet, but we're working on it. We generally are more reactive. We react to legislation that has been introduced. Okay, and I think I don't know, these are things that you can do to know who your legislators are. You can watch them in action, and actually you can go to the General Assembly's website and you can see the House action and the Senate action and the committee actions and what's going on with the Joint Budget Committee, and it's all pretty interesting. And if you've got time, you can sit there all day and watch what's going on. And it's pretty interesting, actually. They talk about everything that affects their lives and everything that's going on in Colorado. And it's just really a great place to see and learn all that stuff. You can attend functions when we get back to doing that. And you can read about them in the press, and you can check out their districts and see what kind of what's the word I want? What kind of people live in those districts? Are they Democrats, Republicans, independents? We're getting more and more independents all the time. And is it a farming district or, manufacturing district, whatever? All those things obviously affect the way they think about pieces of legislation. You can contact them during recess and weekends, and again, just email them for an appointment. Again, as long as they have time, and they do have restrictions on their time for sure. They are willing to talk to people, especially if they perceive that you know what you're talking about. So next slide. Now, Andrea.
Now it's my
Now,
Thank you, Tony. I just want to say before I dive into my slides, I know many of you know me. I'm sure there's some people on the call that do not. I'm Andrea Wilkins. I'm the legislative liaison with the League of Women Voters of Colorado. I'm really excited to see so many returning LAC members and see a lot of new faces out there. I think it's going to be a very interesting session. And then, of course, we have a special session coming up on the 30th. So there's no shortage of action. There's lots of ways to be involved. So let's dive into this next set of slides. So I would like to speak to you about the goals of the League's advocacy agenda and share some basic information on how our members can engage in lobbying efforts. And the overarching point there is to figure out how we do this in a way that both furthers our mission and our policy positions. To start, I'd like to focus on why it's important that the League has an advocacy agenda. And there's really several things that we hope to accomplish with our advocacy efforts. But first and foremost, we want to ensure that we're part of the decision-making process. If we don't weigh in, policy is going to get developed without our input and expertise and without consideration of our concerns and priorities, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to be there. We want our voice to be heard. We also want to be a constructive partner in crafting solutions to the problems that we see both in our communities and throughout the state. We all know that League members are very involved and very engaged citizens, and we understand how our communities are impacted by various issues, and we have distinct ideas on how public policy can be crafted to respond to these needs. So we want to ensure the policymakers see us as informed partners and as people who can speak to the needs of our communities. And by building relationships with other organizations around common goals, we can uncover a variety of opportunities to act in coalition and really get a critical mass behind some of the efforts that we want to see actualized. So lots of opportunities for action. We also want to ensure that policymakers understand our organizational policy position on a particular issue, and we want to push for the development of policy that's going to advance these positions in our mission. One of our key strengths as an organization is the power behind our grassroots lobbying efforts. And by training league members to regularly and actively engage in lobbying efforts, we can affect real change in our communities and within all levels of government. The main way that the League carries out our grassroots lobbying efforts is through the work of our Legislative Action Committee, or LAC, as many of you know, and others have heard us toss around the term a lot. So our LAC members will participate in biweekly meetings, either in person or more recently through Zoom. Though I do want to point out that Zoom is always an option. So even if we get back to a situation where in person really is the default, Zoom is always going to be available. So don't feel like you have to physically come to the office every time we're having a meeting. Remote participation is always a possibility. And so it's through these meetings that we get together and discuss the bills that we're following in our assigned topic areas. Our lobbyists will provide testimony on bills during the committee hearings. And we may want to meet with legislators individually to discuss the League perspective on a particular bill, share our expertise or insights, and possibly share amendments as well. We track our lobbying activities through Capitol Watch, which is our bill tracking system. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that a bit later in the afternoon. And then our members will write articles on their bills and sometimes their topic areas more broadly for the LAC legislative report. We do strongly encourage statewide participation so that it's possible for us to share and understand local perspectives both within LAC and also have the ability to share that statewide perspective with our policymakers so they have a sense of how legislation will impact specific Colorado communities. Statewide participation also ensures that local priorities and concerns are understood and that we have the opportunity to identify issues that may be emerging in various communities that might benefit from a statewide lobbying effort and allow us to act on that. So that input from our statewide league network is a very valuable thing both internally and of course where legislators are concerned. And I do want to point out that anyone can listen to the LAC meetings. If you're interested in actively following our advocacy efforts, you can tune in at any time. You don't have to be an LAC member or actively following legislation. If you want to tune in, you are more than welcome to do that. Okay, so I'd like to shift now to some information on communication techniques that can be employed in our lobbying efforts. In an overarching sense, lobbying communications rely on basic principles of good communication that we rely on and really can apply in any context. Obviously, it's important to understand the issue that we're communicating about. We want to be knowledgeable and know what we're talking about. And we also want to understand as much as we can the perspective of the target of our communication, in this case, our state legislators. Knowing their viewpoint on a particular bill or a larger policy issue will help you relate to them and help you tailor your communication in the most effective way possible. And it can also help you find common ground, which can be really helpful when we're working with those whose views we may disagree with. And as with so many things in life, being a good listener is really important. As Tony mentioned, there's an endless opportunity to learn just by monitoring and observing the legislative proceedings. But overall, this is, really being a good listener is an opportunity to help us learn across the board, help us understand the politics surrounding an issue, which can really inform our lobbying efforts. And it can better position us to identify practical solutions to problems that are, being experienced in our community and in our state. Okay, so getting into a few more specifics about how to actually deliver legislative testimony. It's important that we're concise in our message. We want to be clear about what we would like to see happen and why we've taken a particular position on a bill. It's very important to keep in mind our experienced members know that our positions guide our actions, and we want to see those positions furthered. It's also really important to remember that in most cases, you're not going to have more than 3 minutes to deliver your testimony. So it's important to get to the point and to stay focused. And then whenever possible, we want to use attention-getting language. Honestly, legislative testimony can be a bit dry, especially if it's gone on for a long time. So we want to find ways to incorporate vivid language, to be persuasive, and to use whatever facts or experience that are relevant to illustrating our point and to motivate change. Legislators are very interested in hearing how their actions may impact their constituents and how their actions might affect the public overall. So one way to illustrate this is to incorporate personal experiences. And if you have examples of how an issue is having a community-wide impact or how you think it might have an impact, this is something you want to consider including in your testimony. For example, we know that our members throughout the state are engaged in a variety of activities that provide firsthand knowledge of community sentiments on a whole host of issues. We're involved in things like voter education forums, working at the polls, registering new voters. Many of us are participating in stakeholder meetings and discussions about emerging issues. So it can be really useful to incorporate insights gained from these experiences into your testimony to provide legislators with a community level perspective that they may not otherwise have. And of course, it's important to remember that we need to be respectful and we need to be mindful of legislative protocols and decorum when we're providing testimony, particularly if we're in a situation where there's a particular legislator that is disagreeing with us or we anticipate them disagreeing with us. It's really important to keep that decorum in mind. There are times when legislative actions can have very personal impacts, and obviously this can be emotional, but we need to remember that it is a formal environment. We need to be respectful and professional. We need to recognize other points of view and continue to find constructive solutions, even if things happen to not go our way. Finally, it's really important to be sure that we're really clear about what action we're seeking. Most likely, this is going to be how you want the committee to vote and why. And then at the conclusion of your testimony, you should be prepared to answer questions or plan to follow up with additional information if you don't have the answers immediately, which is perfectly okay. And you're not always going to be asked questions upon the conclusion of your testimony, but it does happen. And it's something that, to the best of your ability, the more that you can kind of prepare for that and think ahead to what might be asked. It's nice to be able to answer in the moment, but certainly don't let it hold you back. If, that's a concern, it is perfectly okay to follow up after the fact. We just want to be, again, very professional and timely when we do that. We also want to remember that our communications are intended to persuade, but we should see them as part of an overall relationship building effort that will allow us to work with these policymakers into the future. So we want to be sure that we're communicating and behaving in a way that's going to make this possible. Okay, and then on this next slide here, we have a number of pointers that you may want to follow. I think we've covered many of the points that are listed here, but this really serves as kind of a quick list or a quick reference of things that can be really helpful to keep in mind. For those that haven't provided legislative testimony before, it can be a bit intimidating, but it actually isn't a terribly difficult thing once you understand the process. I'm always there to support in any way, as are experienced members of LAC. So for our new members, it's really just about demystifying the process. Once you understand how it works, it's not a difficult thing to do. As you prepare your testimony, you want to make mention of how the proposed legislation impacts league positions and why we're seeking a specific action on the bill. We want to be fact-based and rely on research to the extent needed, and also incorporate those unique insights that are gained either through the league's work as an organization or through our personal knowledge or experience. You do need to sign up to testify. So you're going to need to provide your name, organizational affiliation, contact information, and the position that we're taking on the bill. And then you'll wait to be called up by the committee. You should wait for recognition by the committee chair before you start speaking. And then when you go to deliver your testimony, you channel your remarks, or you address your remarks through the chair and to members of the committee. So again, it's just a matter of kind of being mindful of those protocols and, being respectful of the formality of the process. And then again, just being clear on, what we're asking the committee to do. That's really the key reason why we're there. We want to get our point across. We want to push for that action. So make sure that we are being very clear and forceful about that. And it also may be helpful to rely on handouts or materials that can be shared with committee members. You might want to provide written copies of your testimony. This can be especially helpful in the event that you can't stay for the entire hearing. You can always ask that a hard copy of the testimony be provided to members. Sometimes testimony can go on for quite some time. So if you know that you're going to be running up against some time constraints, it's always a good idea to possibly have those hard copies with you, so you can ask that they be distributed, and then you can be sure that your point will be delivered to the committee members, even if you can't personally be there to deliver it. If you're relying on research or a fact sheet setting out information that you would like committee members to consider, make sure that you do bring a copy for each committee member as well. And then it's important to be concise. We want to be factual, and we want to rely on research, but we don't want to overwhelm with research. And we want to avoid being repetitive of testimony that has been provided prior to ours, testimony that's either duplicative or very similar to the arguments and points that we're making. We want to be clear on our position, but obviously we don't want to just restate arguments or information that has been provided by numerous other people. So this is something that you'll just kind of want to look out for as you sit through the proceeding and wait to be called. It's actually something that comes into play pretty frequently, particularly on bills that generate a lot of public testimony. There's a point where it does tend to get very repetitive. And of course, we always want to be very clear on our position and the action that we want to see. It's not necessary to repeat all of those things. So you can kind of curtail your testimony and sum up a little bit more briefly if you've noticed that happening prior to you being called. Last session, the General Assembly established a process for providing remote testimony where you can deliver it in person, electronically, or you can also provide testimony in writing. And obviously this was done in consideration of COVID-19. At this point, it's a little bit unclear exactly how the process is going to work this year, but I think given where we are with the current COVID situation, it's pretty likely that we're going to need to rely on remote testimony and that there's going to be remote proceedings to some extent. So I wanted to make sure everybody had the URL to the remote testimony portal. And this is the link that you'll access to utilize that process. And again, here, if there's any questions about this, please just let me know and we can go over that more as the time comes. Okay, so your legislation makes it through the entire legislative process and it passes. That's great news. It's definitely cause for celebration, but it may not necessarily be the end of our work. We oftentimes want to remain involved to ensure effective implementation of the bill. So in some instances, rules or regulations will be needed to provide instruction to the state departments as to how the program or policy should be implemented. And you can monitor the rulemaking process and also submit comments as appropriate. So you want to stay tuned in to what's going on here. And one key way of doing that is by signing up for Colorado Register email notifications, where you can receive notices about rulemaking, permanent rules, or emergency rules that have been published in the register. And you can sign up, the links here are on the screen. You can do that by department or by topic area. And you can also sign up to receive regulatory notices via DORA. where you'll receive drafts of the proposed rules or amendments to existing rules. And again, this can also be done via department or sorting by department or topic area. Oftentimes, boards or commissions will be created to oversee the implementation of a new program. And sometimes periodic legislative reports will be required to provide the legislature with updates on the status of a new law or program. And you can follow both the work of the boards or commissions or review the legislative reports pertaining to your particular piece of legislation. This is really helpful in us, keeping an understanding as to whether the bill is being implemented effectively and whether it's having the impact that was intended, or if not, it sometimes really shines a spotlight on where modifications to the statute might be needed to correct unintended consequences that might be cropping up. And then finally, it's important to monitor funding allocations. Obviously, if a new program doesn't have adequate funding, it's generally not going to be very effective or impactful. So you want to consider, what's being allocated in the session that the bill was passed, that initial allocation that's needed to get that up and running. And then it's something that you're likely going to want to monitor in subsequent sessions as well as future budgets are created, so you can see how that program is sustained over time. So that's really an overview of the advocacy and lobbying process the League relies on to further our mission and policy positions. And I want to conclude by emphasizing the importance of your efforts in this area. Our lobbyists help ensure that the legislature benefits from our organizational experiences and perspective, including the statewide perspective gained through our local league network, which is a really valuable thing. Through our advocacy, we're building relationships and partnerships with policymakers and governmental agencies that facilitates the good development of good public policy. And above all, we strive to ensure that our citizens are informed and engaged, that our institutions are well functioning, and that our democracy remains strong. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tony for the next section.
You need to unmute, Tony.
Sat there and told myself that, but thank you. So now we're going to talk about how the national, state, and local leagues interact with each other. So the first is, of course, that the league is nonpartisan. Our organization, top to bottom, is nonpartisan. We do not take positions on candidates and elected officials. We've had a rather convoluted statement that we've been using up until fairly recently, but there's a sentiment that maybe we should go to something simpler and say we do not take positions on candidates and elected officials, because some people don't understand the word nonpartisanship. So just to be a little clearer than we have been in the past, you can use this statement. So the National League is responsible for all national policies and the consistency at the national level. State League is responsible for state policies and consistency at the state level. Local leagues cooperate with one another to ensure regional issues are addressed in a consistent manner. And the president or designated spokesperson is responsible for speaking for the league. So we're trying to maintain consistency within each level of league, but also consistency among the different levels. And I will speak a little bit more about that. When you could often say that you're a member of the League of Women Voters, but you're not speaking for them unless you've been designated the speaker. And again, it's usually the president that's the designated speaker unless that's been turned over. Obviously, at the Legislative Action Committee meeting, and the people who are lobbying with that group, they become the spokesperson at the state legislature for various statements and testimony. But that testimony usually goes through some vetting process before before you go and testify before a legislative committee or talk to people. However, you know, we're trying to be very cautious or careful about making sure that we are all talking with the same voice. And that's why we put some of these things in place, even though they sometimes seem a little strange. And you're perfectly free, obviously, to ask for information from legislators. You know, that's not something you have to ask permission for. So the boards interpret the position and decide the position to take. But again, here, the Legislative Action Committee works and we discuss all the pieces of legislation that our lobbyists are interested in, and we take positions on them. There is a process whereby the boards take, you know, approve the positions that are taken. But that usually happens after the fact. And often you may be down at the legislature, you may be listening to what's going on at the legislature, and there's something that comes up and you're the official spokesperson on that piece of legislation. And you may have to just sort of on the spur of the moment, say something. And we all understand that, you know, it's a very dynamic process and we can't always determine what's going to happen. So we don't always have prepared testimony, and if it's an important point, we should make it. So the league can be used from, the positions from the league can be used from other levels of the league as above you. So the state league can use the positions from the national position book and the Colorado position book. Local leagues can use national, state, and their own positions. The league acts only on the issues for which we have positions and in ways our positions indicate. I want to say, though, that the positions are mostly general statements. They're broad. They're to be construed by the boards, interpreted by the boards to fit particular situations. And we are, if you will, loosening up considerably from what we used to do. We could also combine positions. So if there's something in a housing issue, housing piece of legislation that is also environmental, you can use those two different topics to put them together and to have a stronger position on what you were talking about. Positions on various topics are used together, and even if a national position reference just the national level of government. So sometimes it just says, you know, at the federal level, you can do this or that. You can use it at the state or local level. It's when they do the study and when they put together the position, they've said that this is a federal national level position, but it is allowable to go ahead and use it at the state and local levels. Okay, I'm not going to read all this, and I know you probably can't. So I'm just going to quickly go over this. These are the principles of the League of Women Voters, and where the principles come from are all the positions, if you will, not exactly the same kinds of positions we have now, but positions that were before a certain date in the League of Women Voters. So they took all the positions that they had been working on and they put them together in principles, and then they started with a new way of doing studies and action. So we believe in representative government. We support the constitutional framework and the three branches of government. We believe in active participation in government. We protect the right for people to vote. We want efficient and economical government. The government should be responsive to the will of the people. And we have cooperation with other nations as well. Now, you can use these as well. So they're broader, but they could be a basis for your positions or for what you want to say. So don't hesitate to look at the principles and see if there's something there that might be useful when you want to take some action on an issue. And we've moved the principles up to the front of the book, so they're more obvious. They have been at the very back and people forget them. Okay, so at the local issue level, these are positions with that you don't have to get permission when you're acting at the local level. If it's your own position, you're acting only on your own county commissioners, for example, you don't have to ask if you could do that. However, if you are working on something like maybe fracking, that some kind of rule that would cover more than one county or one league area, then you should work with the other league in that area. But again, if it's just to be contained at the regional level and just involves those certain local leagues, then you don't have to come to the state league to get permission. And you might want to talk to the state league about it. You might want to find out if things like that have been going on in other areas of the state, but you don't have to come and say, may we make a statement on this. State issues is the purview of the state league. And if you get a call to action from either the National League or the State League, you are free to act on that. And generally, and I'm not so sure that the National League would be happy if I say this, but if it's something that the National League has said, something like voting rights, and you want to say something about voting rights, you want to talk to your own legislators about it. We have a position on that. We are supporting that piece of legislation. We know that. I think it's all right for people to go ahead and do something about that. But let the National League or the State League know if that's the case, if you are acting in their jurisdiction. But we need to know that that's what you're doing so that we have, again, a consistent voice, that we speak with one voice, that we are saying the same thing across all levels of the league. So national issues, the local or state league can interact with national government presentations in response to call to action on priority issues or upon permission from the national board. And there's a federal action request form that you can get, and there's the address on the screen. If you want to act on something that may not be a priority at the national level, it is important to you, so you can fill out this form and request that they allow you to go ahead and talk to your own legislators, just your own legislators, and on the topic. Generally, these are non-priority issues.
Keep it away from the water, so when you're washing your hair, put your hair down.
Okay, so positions on ballot issues. Local leagues may not take a position on a particular issue that is in conflict with either the national or state position. Local leagues should vote on whether they want to follow the position of the national or state league. And if they disagree with the position taken by the state or national league, then they have to remain neutral. They just don't say anything. And again, emphasizing consistency matters, speaking with one voice matters. And when you're making presentations on the ballot issues, this is voter service, not advocacy. And so that's more Jerry Cummins' area of expertise. So the positions, when you're just doing ballot issues, a straight ballot issues presentation, The presentations are neutral and they provide both sides whenever the material is available. The league's position on a ballot issue can be provided after the voter service presentation is adjourned, completed. You can keep the information separate. We don't want people to be confused with our voter service and with our advocacy roles. So I think that's it. Am I right this time, Andrea?
Yes, that takes us to the end of that presentation.
And I'm going to turn this back to Andrea, who is going to say some things about Colorado Capitol Watch, which is our tracking system that we use for keeping track of bills. Have at it.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Let me shift my screen here. Okay, so returning members of LAC are familiar with Capitol Watch, but it's a system that, as I mentioned earlier, it's our bill tracking system. We use it to keep track of our lobbying activities. It gives us information on the status of legislation. We write summaries that are stored in Capitol Watch, and ultimately we use the information to populate the legislative report page on the State League website. So we've been using it for a couple of years now, and I think we want to try to continuously increase our use. I think as we've gotten better with it over the last couple of years, we're starting to really populate it with our customized summaries and just getting more and more information in there. But we want to continuously do that. So both for members that are somewhat used to using it and are looking to increase their use of it, and new members who are unfamiliar, I wanted to walk through some key steps to using the system. And we'll go over all of this again at our initial LAC meetings when we actually kick things off and start working with the actual legislation. But it's just sort of a preview, and to get everybody kind of thinking along these lines, I wanted to walk through a couple of steps here. So these are, screenshots from the actual Capitol Watch system. So as you log on to the system, you're going to see these various things. But as a starting point, you'll need to figure out what bills that you're going to follow. As I mentioned, when Tony and I were presenting, LAC members will follow bills in an assigned issue area. And as you start to look out for legislation, you may know that some bills are coming, and so you're really tuned into that. Or you may want to take a really global approach to sort of analyzing what's out there, look at the full list of legislation that's been introduced to date, so you can figure out which bills LAC might want to consider and which ones are just not applicable to us. So one way to get started here is to go to the Lookup Bills menu over here. It's circled in red, and hopefully you can all see my cursor here too. I'm going to try and point that out as we go along. But you can see circled in red the links associated with looking at bills. And if you go to advanced search, it's going to pull up this screen here. So you can take a look at all of the legislation that's been introduced to date in both the House and Senate. So between those two lists, you'll see everything that's being considered. And then you can also filter by keyword search or topic area. But if you're really interested in getting, that global big picture sense, these are kind of the first places to go. And then that will allow you to take that broad look and figure out what bills you want to transfer to a list that, you want to mention to LAC because you think it warrants our consideration. All right, so as we're identifying those bills of interest, individual LAC lobbyists will take their list, go through the legislation, figure out if the bill has an impact on our positions that we feel is significant enough that we need to, at a minimum, be monitoring the bill, or if it impacts our position in a more significant way, we likely are going to want to take a position on it, either support or oppose, depending on if we feel like it has a positive or negative effect on our positions and priorities. So once you've kind of made those determinations, you'll want to make a list of the bills that you want to present at the LAC meeting, because then we'll take a look at them as a group. You should be prepared to provide a brief summary of each bill that you think LAC should be following, with some indication of how you feel it impacts our positions. You'll want to recommend the lobbying position that we take on the bill. So again, if it's, it's a positive thing that furthers our position, we want to support or maybe strongly support. If we feel it has a more negative impact, we're likely looking at oppose or possibly strongly oppose, depending on how strongly we feel about the issue. And that will guide our lobbying efforts on it. And then once this information is presented and we've had the chance to discuss as a group, LAC will vote on whether or not we follow the bill and what position that we will take on it. Okay, so once that's been settled and you know that within the bills that you've recommended, which ones we're going to move forward on, you're going to want to enter them into your Capitol Watch profile. And this is actually two separate screen views here, one over here on the left and then another on the right. And once you've gotten to the point where you want to enter a particular bill, you want to go back to your lookup bill menu. And this time you can enter or look up a bill by number. So you can see here that there's a window to enter your bill number. You can enter that information and then it'll pull up the particular piece of legislation. So you can see that it's got, the summary and the information pertaining to the bill. And then down here at the bottom, assuming that you're operating within your issue specific profile, and in this case, I've just kind of used elections and voting as the sample profile. When you pull this up and you see profile down here at the bottom, you'll see that followed by a plus sign. If you click on the plus sign, it's going to add it to that elections and voting profile. So you want to add bills to both your subject specific profile and to our 2021 status profile, a status sheet profile, which is a list of all the bills that LAC is following. And by entering it in those two places, whenever you make modifications to the comments in your bill profile, whether that's tracking lobbying activity or making edits to the bill summary that you might write, it's going to capture it in both places. So it just increases the efficiency and ensures that we're being consistent from one place to another, both for our own purposes and for our audience as well, because these profiles are then accessible to our membership via our website. Okay, and so then once you've got that, you're getting your bills entered, I wanted to give you a kind of a better view of what it looks like to make sure that you're selecting the correct profile and kind of give you a sense of the fact that there are many here. But you can see here up at the top, elections and voting, that's the profile that we're wanting to work in. So you click on the little dot ahead of that to indicate that, yes, this is the profile I'm going to work in. And then you go to select action, and in the drop down, you'll see set profile. So as you set that, that allows you to work within that profile. And you'll always be able to verify where you're at because it's going to highlight it here, but you're also going to see it up here too. When it says current profile, you can see where you're working. And then you can change that as needed. If if you work in more than one area, you'll want to make sure that you're going to the correct profile. And it'll be pretty obvious once you get in there and you see the legislation. If you're not in the right place, it's going to look strange to you. But just as a quick reference, you'll be able to look up there too. And then once you're in your profile, this is where we can enter all of our information about the bill. So the first thing is to identify it by its number. We'd click on either House bill or Senate bill. We would enter the number. We would enter our position on the bill. You can kind of see monitor here is the default, and monitor may be our position sometimes, but in most cases, you're probably going to change that out to support or oppose or whatever the case may be. And then down here, you're going to see your bill list populate. As you add bills, this list will grow, and you can kind of see here that there's actually 2 pages of bills. It's just the photo doesn't show you all of that. But you can see the bill number. That's actually a link. So if you wanted to go to it, you could click on that link and you'd get a summary or the text of the bill, whatever it is you're looking for. There's a lot of options once you click on that. You can see our position. And then you'll see these 2 pencil icons under summary and comment. And summary is our bill summary. And these are our custom summaries where, I think I mentioned earlier where, we're really looking to kind of customize them in a way that, is indicating how we think this bill impacts league positions, why it's a priority for us. So we really want to customize it with a league lens in mind. So it's a little bit different than just a regular bill summary. It's very specific to the league, and we're trying to capture information that we think our membership would want to know about this particular piece of legislation. In the comment section, that's a category. The use here has not been, completely consistent. I think we want to probably try and strive to use it a little bit more frequently, but what we're trying to capture here is basically our lobbying activities. And it's really helpful for individuals to capture what they've done, because over the course of the session, especially if you're working on more than one bill, you kind of tend to lose track about, when you sent an email, or, if the hearing took place in the Senate, or, if you had follow-up conversations regarding that, or if you participated in a stakeholder meeting. These are all the kind of things that you might want to include in this comment section. But it can be particularly helpful if you're working with another LAC lobbyist, either in your assigned issue area, or especially if you're working on the same bill. So you can kind of keep track of these comments, who's done what on the bill. So it's just a good way of keeping organized there. And then once you have your bill profile populated, you've got your legislation in there, you can run reports within the profile, or you can also run one on that 2021 status sheet profile that I mentioned, which will be a comprehensive list of all the legislation that LAC is following. And these 2 options here, there's a couple of different displays that you can pick when you're running your report. You just want to make sure that you're selecting the profile that's relevant, that you want the report for. So if it were elections and voting, again, you'd want to make sure that you had set that as your profile. And then you'd come over here to generate reports, and you're going to see this here, this window here. And then the top 2 are the ones that we use most frequently. The portrait version is a version that allows us to more readily read both the the Capital Watch summary and the automatically generated Capital Watch information that gets entered into the system associated with the bill, and also our custom summary. So in that portrait form, it's just a little bit easier to read more lengthy text. And that's also the public facing version that we post those links on our website. So our membership can access those too. So if they wanted to see all of our voting and elections related legislation, for example, they could click on that link on our site, and it'll take them to the report in that portrait version. The landscape version, we don't make that public, but it is accessible to all of our LAC lobbyists. And it's a little bit more of an internal thing. For one, we don't make it public, but also the way it's oriented is a little bit different. It's going to be in a spreadsheet form, so it's more difficult to read bill summaries, but it's got information that you can kind of quickly just scan across and get really quick status information on the bill, including the status itself, bill sponsors that have got links. So if you wanted legislator specific information, it's got information on the votes. It's got information on the committee hearing date, time, and location. So a lot of the stuff that's needed for lobbyists to actively monitor and lobby on the bill, that comes up in that landscape version. And this is just kind of an overview, maybe a little bit of a timeline of lobbying activities that we will engage in around a particular bill. Obviously, we want to monitor the bill progress throughout its entire process. So from introduction to passage, or introduction to the point that, you know, it's postponed indefinitely or effectively killed. We want to monitor it through that full process. We want to testify at committee hearings in both the House and the Senate committees as it moves through the process. We talked a little bit earlier about speaking with legislators, sometimes on an individual basis is most appropriate, particularly if we want to convey really specific information or possibly suggest amendments. That's a conversation that you'd likely want to have individually prior to the committee hearings. And then as you're working through all of this, you want to keep in mind that it's helpful to update the bill comments and summary information in Capitol Watch in those fields that we just talked about. So as you're, say you're contacting legislators, say you had a meeting, you'd capture that in your comments, and then you'd want to keep your summary updated. So as our membership accesses that information on the website, they'll see the most current summary of the bill. And then finally, it's our hope that you all will be very interested in writing lots of articles on your bills and your topic areas more broadly for the legislative report. Harry and Hannah are legislative report editors, and they're going to be talking in just a minute. But we've got some contact information there. I know Harry had contacted me late in the day, and I didn't have time to act on it, about the possibility of kind of getting a more global email address where LAC members might be able to send things. We can certainly do that to kind of streamline things and just sort of facilitate that communication. But they're going to be talking to you about exactly how you can get articles to them for those that don't know and for those that would like a reminder. But their contact information is there, and I'm sure even if that's not the address that we're sending the exact summaries to, that they would be willing to entertain questions, I hope. And then just some key terminology. So you've heard me throw the phrase or the term profile around probably 50 times in these slides. And by that, I mean the subject specific bill category that are named to align with league positions. So in the previous slide, when we were looking at elections and voting over here, that's named specifically to feel aligned and coherent with our positions. And you'll see that in other topical areas as well. Again, the Capitol Watch comments in the bill profile, that's the internal notes that capture LAC lobbying activity on a bill. The Capitol Watch summary. Capitol Watch does its own summary on every bill, and they are helpful, but they're also general. It's obviously not going to include anything about league priorities or how a bill impacts our positions. So we want to be capturing that in our own custom summaries in that previous profile window that I showed you. We want to really highlight why the bill is important to us, what we think its impacts are on our policy positions, and then any DEI considerations that we think that the bill holds, or if there are impacts there. We really want to flag that for our members. That's something that we really want to prioritize last year. We've been paying attention to it, but we want to focus on it much more heavily than we have up to this point. So certainly we encourage you to be on the lookout for that and to capture that information in your custom summaries as well. And then of course, in any articles that you might write, if it's relevant to include that information, we certainly want to see it there as well. And then the two versions of the bill tracker reports. Again, the portrait version is the public version. So as you're creating those summaries, you'll want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that feels complete and professional, different from the landscape version, which again is our internal notes. That doesn't have to be pretty because nobody besides us is going to see it. But it's different with that portrait version. Those custom summaries for longer term members who know what it's like to have written for the paper version of the legislative letter, where the summaries, we're using grammar, we're using complete sentences, we're not talking in snippets like you do for notes. That's what we want to capture there. And then of course you can be more informal when you're capturing just your notes on lobbying activity in the comments section that would be captured in that landscape version. So I know that's a lot of information. It really is intended just as a preview. We'll be going over this more at our initial LAC meeting, and we'll also be getting into a little bit more advanced training. Capitol Watch has a lot of great information on all sorts of things, on candidates, on legislators, on districts, vote tallies. There's all kinds of stuff in there that is very readily available to us through the system. You don't need to know all that to get started on the system, so I don't necessarily want to get into any of that now, but we will be going into some more advanced training as we reconvene as a group. And really, I think to get started, these are kind of the key things that you need to know. So hopefully these slides maybe can be kind of a reference as you go along, but you should certainly feel free to contact me at any point if it doesn't stick with you, because it takes some time using the system before you get used to it. And I'm happy to help at any point. And now that we're also used to using Zoom too, even giving me, like, we could always hop on Zoom too, and we could share screens and I can walk you through things. And I'm always happy to enter stuff too if you just get stuck. So don't hesitate to contact me. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harry to say a little bit about the process that LEC members will go through to actually compile and get those articles submitted to he and Hannah.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. This is my second year of editing the legislative report, and I'm joined this year by Hannah Crow, who's on here also. The legislative letter is evolving every year, just as everything evolves every year. 2 years ago, it was distributed on paper and mailed to legislators and to the public on paper. So last year, we, as you all know, we changed to a digital distribution from our website and put out a newsletter every 2 weeks while the legislature was in session. And even when it was in recess, we still put out a newsletter every 2 weeks. So we'll do the same thing this year, except I think we can be quicker and more responsive in getting articles out. We don't have to wait 2 weeks. We can be a lot more responsive and quicker because it's digital. And so what Hannah and I will do is take articles that you write on your subject areas. And by the way, thank you for lots of really, really good articles last year. I think during the year, they got better and better and better, to the point that as an editor, I kind of knew what was coming, and I understood the terminology that everyone was using for your areas, and got to be, very, very quick. I didn't have to do a lot of editing, but I will if you write an article and you don't think it's quite ready or whatever, send it. And logistically, it'll just be a Word file, a .doc file, and Hannah and/or I will edit it just to get the right, consistent league terminology and things, in the league format, for standard format for text and so on, and get it out on the website. Cameron does our web, is our webmaster, I guess, and can get things out, as soon as we can turn an article around that you want to get out. And so at LAC meetings or at other times, we'll talk. What do we want to write articles about? What do people need to know? And you'll just send articles to us, and then right away, and we'll publicize where to send that. And then we'll get it out on the website. Hopefully on a lot more immediate basis and more dynamic basis than the 2 weeks we operated on last year. that's it. Hannah, you want to say hello?
Sure, why not? Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm relatively new to this, meaning like, what, about a month maybe? So I'm learning along with everybody else. And, but I'm super excited to be working on the letter, or whatever we decide to call it next, I guess, since it's not really a letter anymore. But first off, I guess I'd really like to know, I guess if you guys want to just comment in the chat or whatever, just if you guys have used the letter or not at all, or if you guys have submitted anything to it. It'd be awesome to know kind of like, I guess Harry and I have talked about it a little bit, how many articles people have submitted, I guess, in the past. But I guess the biggest thing that I wanted to say was that I just really am super looking forward to actually editing and hearing what you guys have to say. So if you guys would submit stuff, that would be fantastic, because we do want to post things in a more timely manner, like Harry said, maybe several a week maybe is what I thought would be awesome. That might not be super realistic, but that's kind of what I would like to do. And yeah, I guess that's it. Just submit stuff. I also
Yeah, okay.
yeah, my email that was on that slide, there was a little bit of a typo. So I put my actual email in the chat. There is an E at the end of my last name, but not in my email. So I'll drop it again in the chat really fast. Or if somebody wants to send it out in like a mass email or something, like please do. But yeah, yay.
Okay. So we'll get the right email out to everybody on the committee. And I think, I would hope, during this next session, that we'll be able to edit and put out as many articles as everyone can write. So, I mean, I think this year, I feel like we can put out a lot more than we did last year on the 2-week basis, So I hope we're off to a good start here.
Well, I just wanted to say a quick apology for Hannah for getting the email address wrong. I hadn't realized that, and thank you for correcting that. I can correct the slide and make sure that the correct version of the slide deck is available for everyone, so you can all hang on to that as a reference.
Yeah, just the easiest way.
Okay, well, that's it.
So I suppose if people have questions, now would be a good time.
Oh, I thought of one thing.
Yes.
Just, Andre, in your presentation, there was the thing about the bill information in the calendar. I don't know if I missed it, but the calendar function is really nice because for people who haven't used it before, it tells you when all of the committee hearings are coming up, when to do testimony and so on. And that really helped me keep track of what was going on last year. So that's what that calendar entry thing is about.
And that's a great point, Harry. And I didn't think to specifically touch on that. That's something that you all shouldn't need to do anything with that. Once we're really set on our issue area coverage, I will enter the LIC lobbyist emails that are associated with that, that topic area or that bill profile. And then, as Harry mentioned, you'll start to get email alerts for when hearings are coming up, in relation to those bills. And it's really handy, especially as the session comes to a close and it gets really crazy and it sometimes very difficult to figure out when the hearing is actually taking place. Capitol Watch seems to stay on top of it better than, certainly the General Assembly website does. So it's just a handy way to do that, and we'll make sure that you're signed up for those.
So Celeste has her hand raised.
I had two things I wanted to say. One is that back a couple years ago when I was on LAC, if you need to contact a legislator and you're in a committee meeting, you can leave your card with the sergeant at arms, write a little note on the back, and the sergeant at arms will deliver it to the member. For instance, if you have to leave and you want to testify, you can request to go early, and you give that note to the sergeant at arms. So that's like a little thing I learned that was very helpful. And then another question I had was, we split up the bills and divvy them out. Has there ever been talk about, we also know our legislators, but has there ever been talk about divvying up all the legislators? Because back before Zoom days, we didn't have very many, are they called outstate league members? We didn't have very many outstate league members, but maybe we should be developing relationships with all of the legislators, and we could divvy up the legislators somehow. I don't know if people have ever talked about doing that.
I don't remember that conversation, but it's certainly a good idea so that we cover everybody. Legislators, as we all probably know, that are much more interested in their own constituents, but the league, however, has a certain cachet. So, even contacting people who were not their constituent might be very helpful. And Ruth Nuremberg is a member of the, help me, Beth. It's an organization for the southern eastern part of Colorado, and it has Action 22. And it has a variety of people in it with a variety of interests. So we're making connections that way as well. We're trying to do more of that, having much more collaborative networking contacts. I'm not going to see everybody's hand because I can't get everybody's picture on the screen.
I was going to add to what Tony just said in one conversation with Representative Sonia Yekes-Lewis, who was the sponsor of a bill I was lobbying on pesticides. And what she said would be highly useful is if we leveraged our league membership in areas, I mean, I'm in Boulder County, not in Boulder County, for example, where so to get members who are in counties that are represented by particular legislatures who might be amenable to lobbying, to get from people who are their actual constituents that are league members, and working within the league then to extend our network on bills of interest to see if we can expand beyond just the people that are on LAC, that assigning somebody like me from Boulder County to somebody out in far eastern Colorado or something probably wouldn't have the same impact.
If you have some connections, if you're working in collaboration with some other organizations, it would be nice for us to know that, so we get a really good full picture or much as possible. The organizations that are out there and the ones that we might be able to call on for particular interests. So if you just send Andrea and me an email with the organizations that you're working with. We have a really, 30, 35 list of organizations we touch in some way or another. So if there are more of them, and especially outstate, would be really great. I see Angie, right? Angie Martinez, did I say your name right? Angie, do you want to say something about who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm an undergraduate student at DU, the University of Denver. And as part of a PLP program, which is a leadership program there, I am to work with a nonprofit organization and just be a part of it and, try to learn how to become a better leader. And honestly, just to open myself out there to opportunities. So that's why I'm here.
Great, super. And there are others of you too, if you want to speak up. I don't know your names, so.
Yeah, I'm also with University of Denver. My name's Abby. I'm in the same program. We're just, we have to pick a nonprofit that works with an issue that we're passionate about. So I'm passionate about voting rights and what you guys are doing. So I'm really excited to be a part of it.
And Jerry Cummins is voting rights expert, so you can talk to her. And there are others as well. Is there another student? I see Abby. Get an idea of what you look like. I think there were 4 of them, weren't there, Beth? Is Beth trying
Yes, I'm here. But, I don't know. Some of them might have gotten scared away by the porn.
Yeah. Yeah, that was too bad. Okay, any other questions? I mean, we're finished with the presentations. So if you have something you want to discuss or questions to ask, now is the time.
I guess I had something to add just a little bit, again, really quickly.
Who's speaking? I can't tell.
It's Hannah. Hi. I don't know if you can see
me.
Oh,
Hannah. Yeah, okay. Hi, Hannah.
Okay. I guess the main thing that I wanted to cover, if it was possible, especially for the legislative letter and also as a part of reaching out to other organizations, is to start working with more people of color. I know a bunch of Native organizations in Boulder and down here in Denver. I live in Denver, by the way, that I would love to reach out to and actually get their opinion on a lot of the issues that we already cover and that we already talk about. So I don't know if it would be a problem at all, but if that wouldn't be a problem, I would love to be able to reach out to a couple other organizations and kind of get their input and their knowledge and know-how of these issues that we already work on, and see if they might want to write for the letter or just kind of drop in on any of our seminars or anything that we do online, just to kind of give their opinions and their own personal stories and anything like that.
Well, and that's a great idea, and we've been trying to do that, not necessarily with First Citizens, or I'm not sure what the preferred term is right now, but Native Americans, First Citizens. So yes, give the names of the organizations and a contact person to Beth. She's keeping track of all the collaborations, and we'll figure out a way to pull them in.
Cool.
Or we'll pull ourselves into their organization.
Sounds good. Nice.
Tony, this is Gia.
Yeah.
Do we know anything, given the fluid situation with COVID and the constantly changing restrictions, do we know anything about in-person lobbying at the Capitol?
I think Andrea's probably kept up with that more than I have.
As far as the special session goes, we will keep track of that. We're going to follow the proceedings there. And they're encouraging, they will definitely have a remote option. And I think they're still encouraging as much remote participation as possible. Legislators themselves will have the option whether they want to do remote or be in person. Fortunately, because a lot of the structure for this was put in place last session, I'm thinking that it will be fairly seamless. It wasn't last session, there was obviously a big disruption, but structures are still in place. So they should be able to participate remotely for those that want to do that, and then, you know, that they can come in person as well. It's my understanding that we can utilize the remote testimony portal in the same way that we did last session. So either submitting testimony, you know, in writing, or signing up to provide testimony in person, but electronically. If I see any change on that or hear any more, I'll definitely let everyone know. But, you know, right now, I think there's encouragement for remote lobbying activity to try and minimize exposure.
Thanks, Andrea.
So I would also say, what's been mentioned, and the question was, when is LAC starting? We're going to have another training on Colorado Capitol Watch that Andrea mentioned. It's going to be more technical, and we did think that we would talk a bit about what we know at that point about the legislature and what kind of bills are being introduced that we might know about as well. Well, we do know, pretty sure, probably alternative voting is going to be there. And Jean Fredlin listed a group of bills on gun safety. So things are dribbling in right now, but there'll be more of them shortly, and we can sort of get an idea of what's going to be happening. And the actual first discussion of bills will be January 22nd, which is what I think Beth mentioned.
If I could butt in right there, Tony.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. To talk about some other upcoming events. For leaguers, we do have a project grant application deadline on the 30th of this month. So if you have a project you would like to apply for, please do. Colorado Gives Day is December 8th. I hope you will consider giving to the State League. The LAC technology training that Tony just mentioned, that will be on more in-depth Capitol Watch as well as social media, is scheduled for January 8th, I believe at 3 p.m. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay. We will confirm that with you all. The Assembly convenes on January 13th. The legislative conference that we put on each year is scheduled for January 16th. And as Tony just mentioned, the first LAC meeting is scheduled for January 22nd.
And you might just throw in Leaders of Democracy.
And February 11th is our Leader of Democracy celebration, when we will be honoring 3 barrier-breaking women, Senator Polly Baca, Lauren Castile, and Elizabeth Piper Ensley. This is a free event that is virtual and you can stream, and I encourage you to invite all your friends and family, and we prepare to be inspired. And I really thank you all for coming today. Thank you to our presenters, appreciate it. Tony, Andrea, Hannah, and Harry. Your work makes this all happen, and I am truly grateful. Thanks always to Cameron Manning, who is the glue. And if anyone would like to hang around and pour yourself a glass of wine or a beer and have a little Friday afternoon club happy hour, please feel free to do so, and we will continue this discussion on a much more informal basis. But thanks so much, and thanks also to Karen Sheik for her lovely welcome and all of her work on our behalf. So thanks, folks, appreciate it, and hope some of you will stick around.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.